The supply chain in California is breaking, and it is not a small problem. It is a full-blown collapse, happening right now. And the governor is finally alarmed, but the damage is already done. This is not a future warning. This is happening in real time. If you buy groceries, if you order anything online, if you live on the West Coast, you are already paying the price. You might not see it yet, but you will. Prices are rising. Delivery times are stretching. Shelves are emptying. And no one is talking about the real reason. I'm Brooklyn, and this channel exists to expose the stories the mainstream media refuses to cover. We follow the evidence, not the narrative. If you want real reporting, hit subscribe right now. Like this video so it reaches more people, because this matters to everyone. Now here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. Have you noticed your grocery bill going up in the last year? Just type yes or no. Because what I'm about to show you is connected to your wallet, your food, and your daily life. And if you think this is just a California problem, think again. This is the gateway for nearly half of America's imports. So if California collapses, the whole country feels it. California's governor pushed through a set of regulations under the banner of progress, but the enforcement and labor rules crushed independent truckers, triggered a mass exodus, and caused a supply chain breakdown that is now spreading across the western United States. This matters to you because it hits your wallet, your food, and your daily life. This is real. Now let's go back to the start. In 2020, California passed a labor law called AB 5. It was sold as protection for workers, and on the surface, it sounded reasonable. Benefits, healthcare, job security. But hidden inside was a clause that would detonate the trucking industry. AB 5 introduced something called the ABC test. It is a simple test, but it has massive consequences. If you want to stay an independent contractor, you must pass 3 parts. Part A, Part B, Part C. The one that killed trucking is Part B. Part B says your work must be outside the usual course of the hiring company's business. Translation: if you haul freight for a logistics company, you are doing the same thing they do. You fail. You cannot be independent. You must become an employee. Now, you might be thinking, so what? Here is the problem. Trucking is built on independent owner-operators. They are the backbone of port logistics. They own their trucks, take the risk, and move the goods. AB 5 put a target on their backs. It set the trap. And it was only a matter of time before the collapse began. The trucking industry immediately fought back. They filed lawsuits. They asked for injunctions. They said AB 5 violated federal protections for interstate commerce. Because that's what trucking is, interstate commerce. You can't let one state rewrite the rules for the whole country. For 2 years, the industry had a legal shield. Independent truckers kept driving. The system kept functioning. But then, in June 2022, everything changed. The Supreme Court declined to hear the case. Let that sink in. The legal shield disappeared overnight. AB 5 became enforceable for trucking. And the clock started ticking. Within days, the California Labor Commissioner announced audits and enforcement actions. The message was clear. Convert your drivers to employees or face penalties. No exceptions. Now, here's the real problem. Most trucking companies cannot afford to convert owner-operators into employees. Because that is not how the industry works. An owner-operator owns the truck. They pay fuel, maintenance, insurance, tolls. They set their schedule. They take the risk. They keep the profit after expenses. If they become employees, the company must provide the truck. Cover fuel. Pay payroll taxes. Provide workers' comp offer benefits. Follow California overtime rules. Follow meal and rest break rules. The cost can easily double. Most carriers operate on margins of 3 to 7%. They do not have the capital to absorb that increase. So what do? They stop operating in California. They pull out. They leave the market. And the independent truckers who built their lives around this work are left with a choice: give up their independence or quit. And many chose to quit. Because the math was simple. The system forced them out. And the collapse began. Now the crisis begins. This is where the numbers start to matter. And the numbers are brutal. Most trucking companies operate on razor-thin margins. 3 to 7%. That's it. So when the cost of each driver doubles, the company doesn't survive. It is not a political problem. It is a math problem. Let's break down the reality. An independent owner-operator typically grosses around $200,000 a year hauling containers out of the port of Long Beach. After fuel, maintenance, insurance, tolls, and repairs, they net between $70,000 and $90,000. It is hard work. It is risky. But it is their business. Now, if that same driver becomes an employee, the trucking company must provide the truck, cover fuel, pay payroll taxes, workers' compensation, benefits, and comply with California overtime and meal break rules. The cost can easily double. And many companies cannot afford it. They are not sitting on cash. They are not rich. They are small and mid-sized carriers, and they live on thin margins. So what happens? They leave California. They stop operating in the state. They shift routes to avoid California. They shut down. By the end of 2022, analysts were tracking a sharp decline in the number of active owner-operators registered to haul in and out of California ports. Within 6 months of the Supreme Court decision, estimates suggested more than 15,000 independent truckers had either left the state, switched to routes avoiding California, or exited the industry entirely. Think about that. 15,000 trucks gone. And you are about to feel what that means. Because when you remove 15,000 trucks from the busiest freight corridor in the country, the entire system starts to break. Now let's talk about what happens when 15,000 trucks disappear. This is where the supply chain starts to collapse. This is where the problem stops being abstract and starts hitting your life. California's ports handle over 40% of all containerized imports entering the United States. That is not a small number. That is almost half the country's imports. Those containers do not sit on docks. They need to be moved to warehouses, rail yards, distribution centers. And the short runs from port to warehouse are mostly done by independent owner-operators. So when those truckers vanish, capacity collapses. When capacity collapses, prices explode. It is basic supply and demand. And the demand is not slowing down. The demand is rising. By early 2023, drayage rates from the port of Long Beach to inland warehouses spiked 30 to 50%. Companies paying $350 per container suddenly faced $500, $600, even $700 during peak periods. And those costs do not disappear. They get passed down. To retailers. To distributors. To you. A furniture importer in Orange County reported logistics costs rising 42% in one quarter. They had no choice but to raise wholesale prices. Retailers raised retail prices. Families across the country paid more for couches, dining tables, and mattresses. This is not inflation in the usual sense. This is a policy-driven price shock. This is a supply chain failure. And it is not just furniture. It is food. It is construction materials. It is auto parts. It is medical supplies. Nearly everything moves on a truck. Here is the scary part. This is not a temporary problem. This is a structural collapse. And it is only getting worse. This matters to you because your groceries, your packages, your medicine, your life depends on these trucks. And the system is breaking. Now let's put a face on this. Because numbers don't show the real damage. People do. Meet Carlos, a trucker from Bakersfield. He has hauled produce for 18 years. He owns his truck. He has a family. He has a mortgage. He has kids in school. When AB 5 became enforceable, his broker told him he had two choices: become an employee or stop hauling in California. The pay offered was 30% lower. The schedule was rigid. No flexibility. No control. No freedom. Carlos refused. He tried to find work out of state. But the contracts were gone. He lost his customers. He had to sell his truck. He lost his business. He now works in a warehouse for minimum wage. His wife had to take a second job. That is one family. That is one life destroyed. Now meet Maria Torres. She is a single mother of 3 in Riverside County. Her husband was an independent owner-operator hauling containers out of Long Beach for 11 years. When AB 5 became enforceable, he was offered a job as an employee driver for a large carrier. But the pay was 38% lower. And the schedule was strict. No flexibility for school pickups. No flexibility for emergencies. He took the job anyway because they needed income. Within 8 months, the strain was too much. They lost their home. They moved in with Maria's parents. Her husband now works nights at a warehouse. That is the human cost. Thousands of families like this. People who built their lives on the promise of independence, only to be forced into poverty. And you might think, so what? They chose this. No. They were forced out. The system pushed them out. The law made it impossible to survive. This matters to you because these are the people hauling your food. These are the people moving your medicine. These are the people moving your packages. And when they vanish, the supply chain collapses. This is happening right now. This is real. Because this is where the story gets ugly. Who benefits when independent truckers disappear? The big carriers. The unions. The political machine in Sacramento. AB 5 was backed by labor unions, especially the Teamsters. Why? Because independent contractors compete with union drivers. They lower labor costs. They reduce union leverage. If everyone must be an employee, unions grow membership and power. That is the hidden reason behind the policy. Not worker protection. Power. Control. Money. And the governor. He gets political cover. He can claim he is protecting workers. He can claim he is fighting corporate greed. But the real victims are the small carriers and independent drivers. The California Trucking Association and agricultural groups have begged for exemptions, similar to those given to doctors and real estate agents. But the legislature refused. Why? Because the unions have more influence than the truckers. Because truckers are scattered, isolated, and afraid. Because the political calculus is simple. Unions win. Truckers lose. And the governor stays silent. No real solutions. No real action. Just political talking points. And the result is a supply chain collapse. The people who are supposed to protect you are choosing politics over reality. Now here's the thing. This is not speculation. Union officials have said this publicly. In 2022, a Teamsters representative said their goal was to eliminate the independent contractor model in trucking because it undermines standards for all workers. Translation: they want everyone to be employees. Because that is how they grow membership and power. You can agree or disagree with that. But the consequence is undeniable. The policy has crippled supply chains, driven up costs, destroyed small businesses, and made California less functional. This matters to you because your groceries and your bills are paying for this political power play. This is happening right now. This is real. The story is far from over. And the next phase is going to be worse. This is where the ticking time bomb starts. California already has a zero-emission mandate for trucks by 2036. Sounds good, right? Cleaner air, better future. But here is the problem. You cannot comply with an electric truck mandate if the industry is collapsing. Electric trucks cost between $300,000 and $450,000. Diesel trucks cost between $120,000 and $180,000. That is a massive gap. And independent operators cannot afford that upgrade. Not when they are already being forced out of business. So what happens? Independent truckers disappear. The only companies left are the big carriers with deep pockets. But those big carriers are avoiding California because labor costs are too high. So the state is creating a system where the people who do the work are pushed out, and the only ones who can afford to stay are the ones who don't want to operate there. That is a policy by contradiction. It is like building a bridge to nowhere. And the result is a shrinking market. Fewer companies, less competition, higher prices, more delays, more shortages. And here is the warning you need to hear. If the trucking capacity continues to shrink, a single disruption could trigger a collapse. A storm, a strike, a port shutdown, a wildfire. One event and the whole system snaps. This matters to you because your food, your medicine, your packages, your life depends on a functioning supply chain. And that system is becoming fragile by the day. This is happening right now. This is real. Warning, warning, warning. The next year could bring major shortages and price spikes. And the state is not prepared. The governor is alarmed, but the damage is already done. And the next wave is coming. AB 5 forces independent truckers to become employees, and carriers cannot afford the cost. So thousands of truckers leave California, shrinking capacity. That drives up drayage rates, shipping delays, and consumer prices. Now the supply chain is collapsing, and the next wave of zero-emission mandates will make it worse. This is not a theory, this is a chain reaction. And the chain is breaking. The governor is alarmed, but the damage is already done. If nothing changes, the next disruption could trigger a full collapse. And you will feel it in your wallet, your groceries, and your daily life. The supply chain is collapsing right in front of us. California's policies have created a chain reaction that is already driving truckers out, raising costs, and making the entire system fragile. And the next phase, the zero-emission mandate, will make this crisis even worse. If you think prices are high now, just wait. If you think delays are bad now, just wait. This is not a distant problem. This is your life. This is your groceries. This is your paycheck. This is your future. So I want to hear from you. Do you think the governor should reverse course? Do you think AB 5 is worth the cost? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. share this video with someone who needs to know what is happening. And if you want more videos like this, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the truth is, the people in power are not going to tell you this story. We have to share it ourselves. Because when the supply chain breaks, nobody is safe. And that is the real warning.